Hey everybody, this is Strange. We're back for the third part of our playground tutorial. This part will go over automation. If you've watched the other tutorials, you should have a good idea on how to set up loadout definitions, how to set up requirements and stat weights, and get everything ready to go. And you can use Playground to manually mod all your units and hit your stat targets and pick all the mods you want. Or you can delve into the automation aspects of Playground to help you quickly find sets that meet your targets and weights. So that's what we'll be talking about in this video. The first part of it will be kind of the basics and what is useful during automation, and then I'll break into the second part of it and say from this part forward we're going into some really technical stuff, and if you don't care you can just drop off the video from there. So let's talk about a couple. The most basic part of it is how do you run automation. So this is assuming you've got all your loadout definitions and your weight set up and you're ready to go. There's three ways to kick off an automation. The first way is at the top on this toolbar right here. You can click the automate button and that will kick off and automate for every single unit in your roster from top to bottom. The second way to kick off an automation is for a single unit at a time. You can do that by selecting the unit and clicking the automate button right here. That will do a single unit automation. You can also do a single unit automation when you're in the manual modding screen. You can click on the unit's mods and you can click automate right here. That will automate a single unit. And finally, the last way to start an automation is to do a continue. Now, the automate at the toolbar starts with the very first unit and goes all the way down. And the automate a single unit does a single unit. What continue does is it automates that unit that you select and every unit after that unit. So if I were, let's say I liked the modding for all the units up to Star Killer, and I wanted to automate Star Killer, and after that, I would go ahead and click resume automation. And that would automate Star Killer, and then it would move to the next unit in the priority order. So that resume button is available through here. You can go ahead and click resume automation. If you go onto the advanced tab here, there's a continue button right here. So the continue button will, in this case, if I clicked it, it would automate Ahsoka and then continue on to Cad Bane, and then so on until the lowest priority order in the list. We've got the different ways to kick off the automation, and they behave a little bit differently. They have different mod pools depending on how you use them. So let's talk about that real briefly. If you go in and you start and automate, the entire mod pool that you have in your roster will be used during that automation, unless you have a unit locked. So how do I lock a unit? Let's say that I really like my General Grievous mods, and when I'm doing automation, I don't want any of the other units to pull mods off of General Grievous because maybe I've done this manually, or maybe I've looked at it and it's just perfectly the way that I want it. You can go ahead and click on lock mods up here. The other way that you can get to lock mods is if you're in the advanced screen. There's a lock button here and an unlock button. What that will do is that will lock the mods on that unit, and no matter where you run the automation from, whether it's from the top up here or whether you go here and click automate, even if the unit is higher in priority order, those mods will not be pulled off of that unit. Those are locked to the unit. You can do that during your modding session. And another thing to talk about is when you save the loadout, you can also save the lock status. So if you want it to persist through multiple, modding sessions, if you always want it to be in your loadout, make sure to check this when you save your loadout, and the lock status will be persistent. So how does that play into things? If I were to lock a few units and then click automate, the automation mod pool would include everything except for the locked units. If I hit the continue button right here, or the resume automation, the mods that are in the mod pool to be used for automation are the mods all the mods not used before that unit. So if I were to continue on General Kenobi, every unit before General Kenobi, from Lord Vader to General Grievous, their mods would not be included, and it would start with General Kenobi's mods, and every other mod would be used for the automation. So that allows us to do something kind of interesting. If we have a new unit and we want to automate their mods, and we want to, let's say, we don't want to strip mods off of any character that already has them. How would we do that? Well, what you could do, let's say the new unit is, it's a new marquee that just came out. Let's say it's Iden Versio, and you want to grab the best mods for Iden Versio, but you don't want to pull it off any other character that had mods. What you could do is you could move Iden to the very end of the priority order. You could then go ahead and click on this, and you could go ahead and click resume. You could automate. Now, since Iden isn't level 50, I can't do it on her, but let's try to pick another unit. Let's say Aura Singh, for instance. I could go here, drop her to the very bottom, and then go ahead and click automate, and it would grab the best mods that weren't assigned to anyone else, because this is the very end of the priority order. Let's say that you wanted to grab the best mods for Aura, but you didn't want, there's kind of an area in your roster where you don't use the characters anymore. So let's say that after my Geos, for instance, these characters, everything after the Geos, I don't really ever use them in my roster, and I have mods on them, but I don't care that they're there. I could drop Aura here, I could go ahead and click on this, and then I could automate Aura, and it would grab the best units for Aura that are either assigned to her here or after her. So it could grab any of these units mods. If I wanted to, now the problem with that it would pull mods off of a few of these units. So you can go ahead and click automate or resume automation, and it would do Aura Sing, and then it would clean up and fill in the rest of the units. If you did that though, you might end up spending a lot of money trying to apply that loadout, because all of these units, the change of pulling mods off Aura might trickle down, and you might have a cascading effect of a lot of units having their mods ripped off and pulled onto other units. So keep that in mind. There's a neat little trick. If you want to kind of mod only one unit, drag it to the very bottom of the list, click automate, and that will pull only mods that are unassigned to people. I think this approach is also really good for a lot of people will want to mod their units manually by hand because they just and rightfully so, they feel they can't get they can get better results if they do it themselves if the automation tool does it. But you usually get to a point where you've done your first maybe 60 or 70 units by hand, and you're like, oh, okay, this is like getting tedious. It's taking a long time. At this point, I want the tool to do the rest of it. So you kind of do your first 50 or 60 units by hand, and then you find that unit where you're like, okay, tool, take over. You can do the rest of it. I trust you. You can select that one unit where you want to start, and then click continue. And then the tool will automate the rest of the units for you. So the way we've designed it is really flexible to allow users to kind of manually do most of their units modding, and then at some point say, okay, you can take over. I don't really want to do every single unit by hand. Let's talk about the automation requirements and the order at which they're used and dropped when you're trying to automate a unit. So there's 5 different types of requirements or factors that are included when automating, and I've listed them here in order of importance that they're used in the automation tool. So you got stat weights are the most, or are the kind of base level importance, then primary set, required and desired stats. And when the automation tool runs, it tries to find a set that meets all of the requirements with the highest stat weight score. And it does that, but if it can't meet all the requirements, then it starts dropping requirements one by one. And let's talk a little bit about how that does. Now, desired requirements are kind of your highest level, your hardest to obtain requirements. So they are only, they're dropped first. And they're only even attempted if you use the option in automation to attempt desired requirements. So if you don't use that option, desired stats are completely ignored. If you do use that stats, it tries to run the automation with all of the desired stats, all required stats, all sets, all primaries, and all stat weights at once. And it tries to hit everything. If it can't hit that, what it will do is it will start to drop desired stats one at a time and re-automate again to see if it can hit the requirements. So let's take a look at that. If I have somebody like Jedi Master Luke here, and he has multiple desired stats, it's going to try to hit it with all of the desired stats first. If it can't hit that, then it'll drop the bottom one. So in this case, it'll drop Luke's speed at 580, and then it'll try it with Luke's speed at 550. So that's kind of the order. Desired, starts with everything combined and then starts dropping them bottom to top. Desired stats are the only ones that do that. Once it processes all of the desired stats, and if it can't find a set that meets them with any of the desired stats, it'll move on and then attempt with stat weights, primary sets, and required. If it can't find a set that meets that, it drops all of the required stats at once. Whereas desired, it kind of works its way bottom to top. Required stats get dropped all at once. If it can't find a working set that meets the top 4, then it will drop the required stats, and it'll try to find a stat with stat weights, primary, and set requirements. If it can't find a set that meets that, then it's going to drop the set requirements and just try to find a set that meets with the primary requirements. And if it doesn't meet that, then it's just going to revert back to stat weights with absolutely no requirements at all. So it kind of works its way bottom to top, and it only attempts desired if you use that option during automation, and it kind of starts at the bottom and starts dropping things until it finds a set of mods that meets its requirements. So try to keep this in mind when you are creating a loadout definition. You want the user who's using your loadout definition to get a pretty good set no matter where they're able to hit. So if you put a bunch of required stats in there and they have really bad mod depth and they drop all the required stats, you still want it to give them a pretty good result with just set, primary, and stat weights. And likewise, if they can't hit it with the set requirements, just the primary and stat weight. So you want to build on top of each other. And at the very kind of base level, if you just automate it with stat weights, you want the result to give a fairly decent result for the character. So there are a ton of different automation options that you can use to change the results and the behavior of your automation. Those by default will come up every time you trigger an automation, and you can also edit them in the settings screen. So if I come here and I go ahead and I click automate, I'm presented with a list of options when the automation runs that can tweak the behavior and give me slightly different results. If you want to see all the options, you can click on this All Options expander, and that shows you every single option. If you tend to switch a couple of them a lot, you can tag them as favorites by clicking on the arrow right here and trigger it on and off, and then your favorites will show up here in the favorite section, just kind of grouped for quick tweaking. And then after you have reviewed your options, you can go ahead and click OK. Now this prompt by default will come up every single time you click on an automation. There is a trigger for that, prompt settings every automation run. If you default that out and you hit automate, it'll just run automatically. If you accidentally trigger this and then want to get it to pop back up and you're like, I can't get it to pop back up, you can go ahead, oops, I should hit cancel, but you can go ahead and go into settings, and all the options are here, and you can flip this back to prompt every single run. When you do run an automation, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I don't have any stat targets, so this should be relatively quick. After the automation is complete, you will be presented with a summary of results. Go ahead and let this finish. And here I'm presented with a summary of results, and it gives me the units, how long they took, the max amount of automation time, their original priority order, their current priority order, and the number of failures. And this is useful if you have a lot of stat targets and you're using one of our features called Auto-reorder. Units can be moved around quite a bit, and you can use this automation results to get a sense of which units are being reordered the most and which units are failing the most, and gives you kind of an idea of like, okay, this unit is really hard, I'm struggling, very difficult to hit their targets. I might want to lessen them a little bit. If you do run the automation and you enable our auto-reorder option, which can reprioritize units to hit as many stat targets as it can, there's a button down here at the end that says update order. And what that'll do is it will reorder your units to the priority order that the automation was able to get the most success in. So it might make subsequent running faster and easier because it ends up being, these are the hardest units, kind of naturally bubble themselves up to the top. You don't have to update the order, but as I said, it might make subsequent ordering a little bit faster. So before I get into each of the different settings, I wanted to give a kind of a simple setting combination that will work most of the time for most people. Now, as you go through the different options and explain what they do, you might think, hey, that's something that I want to make use of, I want to change it. But if you don't want to watch a long, boring video, these are some pretty good option combinations that will generally get you a good result. So here are the settings on the left-hand side and the value. This is the first batch. I'm not going to go through all of them explicitly. We will go through each option and what it means later, but here's a list of options. Here's the second set right here. The two that I will call out is the stop auto reorder at character. You should pick, the question before that is auto reorder on failed target. You select yes, and if you select yes, then you get a drop down for what character you might want to stop auto reordering on. I suggest you pick your first non-important character. So, think maybe you see your priority list and you're like, these are all my important characters, but when it gets to, Wedge or something, I don't really care about him or anyone else. Like, I want to try to hit their targets, but I don't want to reorder and spend a huge amount of time in reordering and possibly making other units worse to hit their targets. So pick a character where you think, I'd like to hit their targets, but it's not critical that I hit their targets. And then the final one is the last two, Uncapped reorder and exit after failure. I would suggest you pick one of those to set to true and one of those to set to false. I like exit after unit failure, but what that will do is it'll stop the reordering if it can't hit a unit's requirements. And then what I like to do is I like to fix it and then run the automation again. If you don't like that behavior, if you want it to just run all the way from beginning to end, and just if 5 units fail, then enable leave uncapped reordering as no. Uncapped reordering no will prevent it from running in infinite or near infinite loops of reordering possibilities. So this is just a basic guide. It's not always going to work perfect for everyone, but it's a pretty good basic list for you to use. I'd like to mention quickly a couple of things that can cause automation pitfalls, some really slow automation times, or mistakes that I've seen people make, and maybe we need to do a better job in the tool of kind of bringing the awareness to people that their problems. The first one is sometimes the automation can take a long time on a particular unit. I found that the performance is pretty good. If you have 1 stat target, it's very fast. 2, it's usually pretty fast too. Even a lot of times for 3 or 4 stat targets, the tool is able to automate within a few seconds. Occasionally, though, it can take a long time. The number one culprit of that is when the stat weights for a unit don't match the targets. And the reason that can cause a long automation time is because mods are sorted based on their stat weights. So let's say you have a really hard crit chance target and a really hard potency target, but you didn't give those two stats any weight at all. Well, those mods with high crit chance and high potency would be low on the list, and the automation would get to them last. And that causes automation to take a long time because it's going through other mods that get higher scores, but they're not able to meet the stat requirements of the units. So you kind of want your weights to be generally comparable to the difficulty to meet the stat targets. And we do a lot in the sorting and the optimization to try to correct for that. But I will say in general, try to get your weights and your stat targets to line up, because that can improve performance. The other problem is if you have a really hard stat targets and your mod depth just isn't great, and you use auto-reorder, that can cause a lot of reordering of the tool. We're going to go through some options where you can cap that reordering, but if you don't use any of those caps and you're using some stat targets that you really have no business using because your mod depth isn't that good, you can just see the tool kind of spinning its wheels trying to find one more unit to hit stat targets by trying hundreds and hundreds of different unit combinations. So auto-reorder is incredibly powerful because it can find combinations, but it can also get you in a big slowdown. Last thing I'll mention is all of the automation assumes that mods are at level 15. So that was a decision we made. We just assumed, hey, people are going to want to find the best mods, and they're just going to level them to 15 if they're the best mod. We didn't want to have another option in the tool. But if the stats that you see in the tool and whether they hit their stat targets are going to be based off them being leveled to 15. So after you run the automation, make sure to use the filter on the units to only show units that need leveling, and then you can go in and level those mods up to level 15. Or you might think you're hitting a stat target and then go in game and notice that you're not because your mods aren't leveled. The next thing I'd like to address is the automation going to find better mods for me, or am I better off doing it by hand? I'm not going to claim that the automation tool can do a better job than a person doing it by hand. I think there's nuances that people can just process information better and pick better mod matches and combinations than the tool can. But I think when you're kind of limited by time and you just can't spend a huge amount of time or don't want to spend a huge amount of time remodding, the automation is a good alternative. And it's one I use because some of the tools in game aren't the greatest, the easiest to use to remod, and I often get to a point with units where it's just, hey, I don't care anymore but to do it manually. I want the tool to be automated. If you have the opportunity to, or if you have the resources to, I would really suggest taking a look at some of the remodding services we offer. If you go onto the HotUtils page and then underneath mods, there's a services tab, and we have some people that are kind of trusted modding experts. And if you are a HotUtils member, you can give them sharing access to your account, and they can go in and go through Playground or another tool and create a loadout for you, and then do all this work for you and say, here you go, it's done. And you don't have to worry about this. Swerve is actually a member of the HotUtils staff. He understands Playground really well. He offers tutorials, and he can set you up, create a loadout definition, and explain things to you. He's great. I work with him all the time to improve Playground. Pimpo is very well known in the community. He's one of the top GAC players. You can always see him in the top 50, and he has done hundreds, if not thousands, of accounts of the top people in the game. So when I'm advertising Playground, I am absolutely not saying that they're better than these remodders. I encourage you all, if you can, check them out. If you don't want to, Playground is a good alternative to get you something that's pretty good, pretty presentable, that hits your targets. Okay, I promised you guys I would warn you when I started to get into some really boring, low-level details. This is the point. I gave you kind of an overview of how the automation works, and some basic settings that result in success and how you can trigger it. The rest of the video, I'm going to go into every single option that we have and what it does. There is some useful stuff in there talking about reordering, and if you are able to stick through the entire video, I think you'll understand how to tweak performance and how to get the best out of the automation. But it does go into a little low-level detail, so the rest of it, take what you want out of it. Let's talk about the don't break mod set option. To start, we'll make sure everybody understands what a broken mod set is. A broken mod set is when you don't complete a mod set with every single mod that you have. So the Mandalorian Beskar armor is a perfect example here. He's got a crit damage diamond, and he doesn't complete the crit damage set. He also has that for health. I was modding him to make sure he had SixE for all the mods, so it's pretty bad modding here. But he clearly doesn't. He clearly is breaking mod sets with the selection of mods that he selects. Now, if I go ahead and automate, I get an option on whether I will allow broken mod sets or not. So let's go ahead and do an automation, and let's allow broken mod sets, which is turning this to off. I go ahead and click OK, and the best set that it finds for his weights are a health triangle and a crit damage arrow. So that is a broken mod set. So the best mod set it has found happens to be broken. It might happen to find a mod set that isn't broken, but if I want to prevent the Mandalorian and say I don't want all my units by default to have broken mod sets, I can go ahead and toggle this, don't break mod sets. Go ahead and click OK. I know there's some double negatives in that. And now it selects a set with a health triangle and a health arrow. So that is completing a mod set with health, and it's completing a mod set with speed. So this is the global setting that gets used for every unit. Now, you can overwrite that on a per unit basis by going into the unit, going to their sets tab, and selecting either no broken sets or allow broken sets. That will override, if you select either of these two options, whatever option you select when you do automation. So what if I select allow broken sets? I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to automate, and even though I have don't break mod sets here, he finds that broken mod set because I've overridden it. So this option really comes down to how you want your default preference to be, because you can go into every unit and override the default and say whether each unit should allow broken mod sets or should not. And it's simply whether you want the default to be to allow broken mod sets or you want the default to be not to allow broken mod sets. If you go in and override that default for every unit, it has no effect at all. It's just what do you want the default to be. The next option we'll talk about is limit searches with stat targets. And I think this is one of the most important options that you can configure to ensure that your optimization runs quickly. Let's take a look at where that option is and what it looks like. Here's the option, limit searches with stat targets. And once you select it, you also get the option for the minimum number of compares with the match found. So what does that do? Remember, mods are sorted from highest to lowest based on their score. And the optimization engine will look for a mod that matches the restrictions. That's your set, your set restrictions, your primary restrictions, and your stat restrictions. And as soon as it finds a match, do you want the optimization engine to exit, or do you want to continue searching for a match set that might have a higher score? Well, how could that possibly happen, you might ask? Well, the reason is because it sorts each mod best to worst and then evaluates it by slot. So it's possible that it finds a set that matches a stat target with a high mod in the square slot, but it didn't get to evaluate a mod with a high mod in the triangle slot. And I know that might be confusing, but basically, do you want it to keep searching for a higher mod score, even if it found a mod set that matched the stat restrictions? Now, I recommend enabling this option and setting it to something like 20,000. Now, I think the default is 200,000. Let me show you what it looks like when you run an optimization with this set. If I go ahead and click Automate, you'll see occasionally that the found match looking for improvement, and you'll see your progress bar go from 0 to 100. Now, sometimes it exits early. When does it exit early? It exits early when it knows that it cannot find another set with a higher score. But sometimes it'll go all the way to the end of that. And sometimes, especially if you're doing dynamic reordering, you might see that bar come out over and over again. I've seen some people set this number to something like 200,000, and I tell them they're not necessarily getting their return on a value, because mods are sorted from best to worst. So when it finds a mod set that meets your stat targets, you're getting a pretty good set. And if you're setting that number really high, like something like 2 million, you're searching and you might not even find a better mod set, but you're spending lots of time. The tool has as many optimizations as it can to eliminate paths when it knows it can't get anything better. So I would advise to set that number to something like 20,000. You can tweak it, and it depends on the amount of reordering you do during your optimization if you want to set it higher and see how long it runs. But I would really look when you run your automation, and if you see this number, it spending the optimization and spending a lot of time doing this, the easiest way to improve the speed of your optimization is to go in here in your automation options and limit the searches with stat targets. Now, what does the number mean? That's the minimum number of compares with the match found. So the number of compare counters starts at 0 when you start looking for mods. And then if it finds a set at, let's say, 199,999, it will do one more match compare before exiting the algorithm early. If it takes 500,000 mod searches to find a matching set, and then it finds a matching set, it will have already done 200,000 compares, so it will immediately exit. So this is the minimum number of compares that it will do with a match found. That's what that option does. I suggest everyone use it. I suggest using a number like 20,000. That might be default, different than what's in there. Maybe 10,000 would be a good number, and play around with it. But if you're doing lots of reorders, if you're seeing slow automation, this is a great option to tweak and set that number down. Because like I said, mods are already sorted best to worst. Usually you get a very good mod set found when you set that number low. The next option we'll talk about is try to use existing set if it meets stat requirements. This option runs when you try to automate a unit that has stat targets and they already have a set, either from the loadout definition or in-game, that already meets the stat requirements set forth by the loadout definition. It will grab that set and then it'll immediately move on to another unit. Now, I'll be honest with you, I don't think that this provides a huge benefit of speed. The reason is because previous units in the automation could very easily grab a mod from the unit that you're getting to, and by the time it gets to that unit, the 6 mods that it had in-game or in the loadout aren't available, so it has to automate otherwise. Or it might, through unit prioritization reordering, it might have to steal a mod from that unit. So when I've seen very complex loadouts be automated, I don't see this option really returning a huge amount of investment. You can go ahead and try it. Doesn't really hurt anything. And if you have a loadout that meets 99% of the stat requirements and you're just trying to add one unit, you might want to go ahead and use this option and see if it provides you any benefit. You might see a small speed benefit. I don't see a huge one. The other thing I'll note is if a unit does not have stat targets, because the automation is so quick, we don't use this option. It will, if a unit has no stat targets, it will just fully re-optimize the unit and grab mods from anywhere. Another option that you can use is to simulate mods as SixE. And what that will do is it will apply the stat bonuses that you would get to mods if they were sliced from 5 rarity to 6 rarity. So you can look at what would happen. There's a good article on gamingfans.com that talks about the improvements that mods get when they go from 6 rarity or 5 rarity to 6 rarity. And what you can do is when you automate, you can say, simulate all my mods as SixE and pick the best ones as if I had sliced everything to SixE. That would allow you possibly to hit some stat targets that you weren't before, and it might also help you identify some mods on high priority targets that would be better if you did slice to SixE. So let me show you what that would look like. If I come in here into the tool and I click automate, and here's the option. Let's not use it. If I go ahead and click OK, here's the set that it picks for Lord Vader. And you'll see that it thought the best one was this arrow, even though the arrow isn't SixE. But if I go ahead and I go automate and I say simulate a SixE and click OK, what I will get is the result of that arrow sliced to SixE. So in this case, it actually did do the conversion. It's got like a little gold border around it, which tells me, hey, that's not your actual mod stats in games. That's what the mod would look like when it's sliced. And it also gives you what the stats would be when you did slice it. So I like this option, probably not for all my units, but I like to do it. I like to run the tool and see if some of my top units pick mods that I haven't sliced yet. And it's kind of like, oh, the automation thinks that's a really good mod. Maybe I should actually slice it. A couple of things to kind of be aware of: if you have stat targets and you simulate a SixE, it's going to show you making those stat targets, whereas you might not make it without slicing that mod. So don't think that you've hit that stat target and then apply it in game and be confused why in game it doesn't hit that. You'll have to actually go find that mod and slice it. There's an easy way to do that. If you go ahead and click on the mods and go in the manual editor, which we showed before, you can then click the arrow, and as you see here, it's not sliced. I can then select manage and slice it to keep it up with the simulation. There's also an option that we put in there when you do the automation is you can simulate mods only with a minimum speed. So what that says is, let's say you would never want to slice a mod that had less than 15 speed. You could go ahead and say only simulate mods that have a 15 minimum speed and give me the results there. So it's kind of an interesting tool to use to kind of help show what the automation might pick as a really good slice mod when you haven't actually sliced it. And it's also good if you're trying to hit a lot of really hard targets for your units. Sometimes the simulation can just all of a sudden make or break whether you're hitting those stat targets or not, and give you a goal of which mods to slice. So one of the factors in having a successful automation, especially if you have a lot of hard to reach speed targets, are kind of balancing out and saving your good speed mods to use at later good targets. Like if you start on one of your top units, you don't want to waste all your super good speed mods when you could have hit your speed targets later with slightly lesser mods. And there's two settings that we've implemented to try to help you do that and kind of, I would say, balance out the quality of speed mods as you go through your automation. The first one is favor speed arrows. So most people's mod collections, they have a lot of speed set, speed arrows. And when you're trying to make or create a speed set for a unit, sometimes it's more useful to use a speed set, speed arrow, and save that offset for a unit that maybe needed that offset because they weren't doing a speed set. So for instance, like let's say that you had your first unit had speed and health set, and then you had another unit that had 3 health sets. It would be a better distribution of the mods if the first unit used that speed set, speed arrow, because you would want to save that health set speed arrow for the unit that only could use health speed arrows. I know that's a little wordy. Let's show it in actual action. If we come here and do Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, I had to automate a few before I got an actual example. But if I don't use favor speed arrows and I automate him, it finds the best arrow for him to be a health set arrow. If I do favor speed arrows, it's going to put a factor on an arrow that is a speed set and favor it by that. So I go ahead and do the automation now. What I get is a speed set, speed arrow. I don't know if it's the most important option to use. If you are really trying to conserve your arrows and spread them to units that have a lot of stat targets, you might want to use it. There's also a factor in how much you favor speed arrows. It can help you kind of reach more targets on more units, but the effect might not be huge, especially if you have lots of different types of speed arrows. So use it sparingly. You might want to try different runs, see which ones work for your mod collection. I don't think it's a make or break setting, but it can help. The second option that we have to balance out the quality of your speed to hit as many targets as possible is smooth speed on required targets. And this one really can be powerful, and I do suggest that people use it as much as possible. What it does is, for units that have minimum speed requirements, it tries to hit that speed at the minimum amount possible and not go over. So if you have a speed target of 330 speed, it tries to hit at exactly 330 or 331 or 332 and not hit at like 350. So what you're doing is you're saving all that extra speed secondaries for other units that may struggle to hit those speed targets later. And the second thing that it does is it tries to, in doing that, balance out the speed secondaries. So let's say that in order to hit your speed target, whatever it is, you needed an average speed secondary of 16. It tries to hit that by making 16 speed secondaries on all of your mods, and not have one mod be like a 27 speed and then all the other mods be 10 speed, for instance. So what it's doing is it's smoothing the speed across your mods and minimizing the speed that you need to hit the required stat target. So let's show it in action to see, maybe you understand it better visually. If I come in here and let's give General Kenobi a stat target. Let's create a new tier, tier A, and we'll set his speed target to be 560. I'll make this a required target, save my definition, and now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to automate. Okay. He ends up taking a speed set of 582, even though the minimum is 560. And you'll see he's pretty much just grabbing as fast mods as he can, and they're all over the place. Because my stat weights for General Kenobi, let's look at weights, it has speed very high here at the 40 speed. So there's some wasted speed there, about 20 wasted speed, where I could have gotten away with 560 to do whatever counters that I wanted, and then those extra speeds, those really good, 27 speed secondaries, could have been used on someone else down the road that that maybe had a very hard stat target to hit. So let's go ahead and change the setting for this. And I'm going to say smooth speed on required targets. I'll give it a factor of 30 for now. I'll talk about that in a second. And now I'm going to go into Kenobi and let's automate again. Now he finds a set that is 563. So he's basically barely meeting that requirement that he was, and all those mods that had really high speed secondaries can be used by units maybe that are really going to stretch their requirements to hit their targets. And if you also look at the actual numbers on the speed secondaries, you'll see 22, 21, 23, 21, 21. They're all very close to each other. So you're really using as little speed secondaries as you can get away with to hit your stat targets. And I have seen this setting have a huge effect on whether people are successful during their automations. And there's a couple reasons for that. The first reason is, you're saving mods for later units that'll need them. And the second reason is that it really helps when you have relative stat targets in there. So if, let's say I had, my boss, I set him, I wanted him to have 300 speed, and then I had another unit, like let's say Grief, that I wanted to have 300. I wanted his Grief speed to be 1 greater than Bosk. Well, if Bosk came and just grabbed the fastest mods that he could, then that's going to make it much harder for Grief to hit his speed targets because he's relative to Bosk. And now by Bosk grabbing the fastest speed requirements that he could get, you've increased the expense of Grief's stat targets as well. And speed smoothing has this kind of natural way of just grabbing the minimum that you need and then allowing Grief to only have to get the minimum that he needs too. So there are small drawbacks to it. You definitely, if you have a unit that you just say, I want this unit to be absolutely as fast as possible, it is going to kind of taper it down. But it really does, if you have a lot of speed targets, many targets on speed, it really does help smooth that out. This option, when used, has no effect on a unit that doesn't have a minimum speed because you don't have a target to kind of average out to. So if you have a unit that has no set minimum speed, it's just going to grab as fast as it can and completely ignore this setting at all. But if you do have speed minimum set, it's going to try to hit that target with as little extra speed used as possible. This does make a big difference in success I've seen, so I would suggest you try it. So the option for auto reorder on failed target is one of our probably most powerful automation features, and it allows people to hit stat targets and stat combinations that they probably would have a miserable time trying to hit without it. And what it allows you to do is have the tool move units up in the priority order to see if they can hit their stat targets at a higher priority order while maintaining the stat targets of all the units above it. So the definition kind of is pretty simple. Reorder, move a unit up in priority order if it fails. But let's kind of show an example. I have my kind of really pathetic pictures here, but I'll try to explain the best I can. So let's say you have these 4 units here, and this is the priority order of the units, and they all have stat targets. Lord Vader's the highest priority order, so he's going to go first. He automates. So let's say that he hits his stat targets. So he's good. He gets kind of a check box. Then Kenobi goes. He makes his stat targets. Everything's fine. SLKR goes. He hits stat targets. Everything's fine. Jedi Master Luke comes and he cannot hit all of his required targets. So if you have auto reorder enabled, what it will do is it will move Jedi Master Luke up in the priority order and try with the new priority order. So in this case, and I think it moves him up by 1/3 of the units in the list above him. So let's say Jedi Master Luke was at priority 10. I think it then moves him up to like priority unit 7, so about a third of the way up the list, and then it moves him up to maybe priority unit 3 or something after that. Likewise, let's say a unit was at priority order 100, it would move them up to 70. So it's the farther down in the list you are, the more it moves it up to hit the target. So let's say Jedi Master Luke failed, and then it reorders him. It's going to move him above Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. And so what it will do is it will now automate, but it will have in its automation pool all of the mods that SLKR used. And because SLKR might have grabbed some great mods, he might have a chance at hitting his targets. So let's say he still doesn't hit his target. So then it's going to auto-reorder it again. And now, Kenobi, drops his mods, and Jedi Master Luke, has some more mods to work with. Let's say at this point he is able to find a working mod combination. So now it's great. Now I've got Lord Vader's mods. They hit all their requirements. Jedi Master Luke Skywalker hit all of his requirements. Now what it will try to do is it will say, okay, I've done a reorder, but all of the units that used to be above me have to still hit their requirements that they hit before too. So it will, let's say it tries Jedi Master Kenobi, it's able to find, because maybe Jedi Master Kenobi didn't have, incredibly hard stat targets to hit, and it does Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, and Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is able to find mods that hit its targets too. And now it's done automation, and it now has a order at which it was able to hit stat targets for all 4 of these units. Whereas when Jedi Master Luke was at the bottom, it couldn't hit those stat targets. So this becomes the new order and the new prioritization, because it's able to hit stat targets. Let's talk about a couple of examples when it's not and what the tool does. So let's say I have Jedi Master Luke here. It does the same thing. Hits this target, hits this target, hits this target, fails on this target. It moves it up here. Okay. I don't find a matching target. I have to move it up again. Now Jedi Master Luke is number 2. And now it hits the target. So, okay, it's good. Now it says, can I hit all the targets that I hit before? Let's say it hits Jedi Master Kenobi, so that's good. And then it goes to Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. Now Supreme Leader Kylo Ren can't find a set, because maybe Jedi Master Luke grabbed the mod that Supreme Leader Kylo Ren absolutely needed. Well, now we've got a problem. So what it will try to do is it'll try to move Supreme Leader Kylo Ren up to 3 here and say, okay, well, can I need it here when Supreme Leader Kylo Ren is in 3? And if it can't, then the reorder is considered a fail, because it was not able to move Jedi Master Luke into a position where he hit his stat targets and all the units after him, all the units before him that previously made their stat targets can still hit their stat targets. So it considers this reorder a failure, and it resorts to what we had before. So I think it was Jedi Master Kenobi, Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, and then Jedi Master Luke Skywalker here. So it says, I can't reorder, it was a failure, and Jedi Master Luke, because he can't hit his stat targets, we have to lessen his requirements. And if you looked earlier in the video, if you saw that, you talk about, okay, what's the prioritization for dropping requirements? So it will, first it will drop your, requirements, then it will drop your set requirements, then it will drop your primary requirements, then it will drop your, then it goes straight back to stat weights. And so it does those processes in place until it is able to find a matching set for Jedi Master Luke Skywalker. So auto-reorder on failed target allows the tool to do that optimization where it's shuffling the units around, trying to find a combination where it meets all the stat targets. It does allow you to hit a lot of stat targets that you wouldn't have previously hit, but on the flip side, if you're really close in a lot of instances to hitting stat targets, it could just go through lots and lots of different combinations. So it has the possibility of drastically increasing your automation time. So be careful about it, especially if you're doing really hard stat requirements. We have a couple of settings later that I'll talk about that kind of help you manage that, getting in that infinite loop of reordering, because you can get in that if you're not careful. One of the settings, if we go under here, we use auto-reorder on failed target, is where to stop auto-reordering. So you might get to a point where, these 4 units are really important, and I really do want them to hit their stat targets, so I'm willing to reorder for them. But there's a certain point in my priority list where, look, this unit's just Clone Wars Chewie. I really don't care whether he hits his stat targets. I don't want to do reordering for him. You can set a unit that's like, this is where you stop doing auto reordering. And if I can't hit my stat targets, just drop my stat targets. So this unit that you select is kind of one of those units where it's like, it's not that important anymore at this unit. That's one of the caps on the auto reordering. We'll talk about a couple of other ones. But it's very powerful, also has the greatest chance to kind of have your automation run forever. But that's how auto reordering works. One other important thing to mention, and this bleeds into our next option, is desired requirements do not cause a reordering of units. So if you're going through your priority list and you hit a unit that can't hit its desired requirements, it'll attempt them if you use that option. But if it can't meet all those desired requirements, it will fall back to required with the unit still in its current spot. Now you can overwrite that by using the option treat desired as required. And what that will do is it will just basically take everything that's in your desired list, move it to your required list, and they get treated the same. This is a good option to do if you're in a guild that has maybe a territory war and you're positive that you can hit all of the desired requirements. You can trigger this option and the automation will run and have strict protocols on the desired requirements, and it will reorder units if they don't hit their desired requirements and behave exactly like a regular requirement. And then finally, the last option on how to treat desired requirements are to attempt them but don't reorder because of them. So that puts you there's kind of like 3 different scenarios on how the automation will treat desired requirements. The first way is to completely ignore them all. The second way is to attempt them but don't reorder. That's this option right here. And the previous option is to attempt them and reorder if you don't meet those requirements. This is usually the option that I tell people to, try, because, it's good to attempt your desired requirements. If you can't hit them, it'll drop them. It won't cause any reordering. The previous option is one that I'm less likely to suggest people to use unless they're very sure that they can meet all the desired requirements. So there's 2. There's attempt desired but don't reorder, and then there's basically treat desired as required, which is basically attempt desired and reorder. So you have a little bit of control over how you want the desired requirements to be treated in the tool during automation. The next option is called use derived requirements, and that's one that I suggest that everyone use. I think it's a good option, and what it does is if you have a relative requirement, so let's say that you have Darth Revan and you set Darth Revan's speed must be equal to 330, and then you say you want your Malak to be faster than Darth Revan. Then Malak gets a derived requirement of being faster than 330 because he's got a relative requirement, and his relative requirement has a hard requirement. So he gets a derived requirement. So using derived requirements makes your automation more successful, because if it if Malik was higher in the priority order, he would be able to know his derived requirements and pick a speed that will then cause Darth Revan to also be successful. So this is a good option that allows for more successes no matter what the automation order is, and it makes automation and reordering much more successful. I might end up getting rid of this option at some point because I don't see any reason why it shouldn't be used. I think I included it originally because the code was a little complicated, and if it wasn't working, I wanted people to have a way to disable it if it was breaking anything. But it seems to be working pretty good. I would suggest that everyone uses this. It makes more successful reorders possible. So earlier I had mentioned that if you use the option to reorder on failed target, you can get huge number of reorderings and automations that take hours and hours to succeed. And that usually happens when you have a lot of stat targets and you're barely able to meet all of them, or you're not able to meet all of them, and the tool is just continually trying different orders to see, you know, hey, if I move this unit up 1, if I move this unit up 2, can I be successful? And uncapped reorder, there's two options that we put in place to allow you to prevent that kind of runaway reordering from happening. One of them is called uncapped reorder. And I know this is kind of like a negative option, but by default, the way reordering works is here we have an order, and I talked about this earlier. Let's say you had Lord Vader, he automates successfully, Kenobi automates successfully, Kylo automates successfully, and then Luke comes and he's not able to automate, and then you move him up in the list, and let's say he's still not able to automate successfully. That becomes kind of like your failure point right here, which is the Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, which is the first unit to not be able to fail. And that is usually where you've kind of hit a threshold of you know, my mod depth isn't good enough. And what I've seen with a lot of people's optimization is after they hit that threshold, they tend to hit a lot more units that can't meet requirements. So the default behavior is when you get to, you know, you continue on the list, it'll go to Sith Eternal and then it'll go to Rey. And let's say Rey fails, it will reorder Rey up, but it will not go past Luke Skywalker in the reordering. It'll kind of, that line that it's decided that this is the failure line that I have. Rey will be tried all the way up in her reordering up to JML, and to see if she can be successful. And it won't go any higher, it won't go up to the very start. And what that does is it kind of sets a limit on if people have kind of hit a mass of requirements that they can't hit, it won't continue to make the problem worse. Because what I've seen is some people might maybe have, you know, 150 units with stat requirements, and they can hit the stat requirements on the first 100, and then after that, you know, they can't hit any. They've just kind of run out of all their good mods. And if you're using reordering, you know, you've just got so many units that all try to work their way up in the reorder, and then those get reordered, and you just get into this almost infinite loop of failures when there's no real chance for you to succeed. So the default behavior will kind of cap your reprioritization at the previously failed unit. Now this option that we, you know, created, uncapped reorder, gets rid of that capping. So basically what it says is that even if Jedi Master Luke succeeded or failed, Rey can go all the way at the beginning. So you might want to use that option if your automations are running pretty quickly and you're like, you know, I don't see this infinite loop of reordering. You know, it only takes 5 minutes for me to run my automation and I want to try to get the best result possible. You can select that because, you know, it is possible that, you know, Rey wasn't able to succeed here, but if you move her up, between SLKR and Kenobi, then she can be successful. So that's one option that you can check to possibly give you a little bit better results if you're willing to spend a little bit more time during automation. If none of your units fail, this option has no effect at all, because you never set that line where units can't be reordered to. And then the last option we have with dealing with reordering, runaway reordering, is to give the user an option to exit after unit failure. And this is one that I actually like to use a lot in mine, because what it will do is it will, we talked about in the previous reordering approaches, the very first unit that it hits that it's not able to reorder and find a matching set for. So in the examples I had before, I gave Jedi Master Luke, he was reordered, but we weren't able to find him a matching set. The automation will stop right there, and it will save the selected mod sets for all the units it was successful for, and it'll just exit out at Jedi Master Luke, and he'll have. I use this one because my goal when I do an automation is to have everything be successful. And if I get to a unit that is not successful, I don't want it to go any further. I want to decrease the requirements or adjust what the requirements are so that I can be successful for my automation. Now, everybody has a different approach, and you might not want to do that. But what I tend to do is I tend to use this exit after unit failure. I'll run the automation. If it fails on a unit, then what I'll do is I'll go in my list, I'll find the first unit that failed, which would be Jedi Master Luke, and I'll say, oh, you know what, his protection requirement's a little too high. I can't make that. Let me bring that down a little bit. Or maybe what I'll do is I'll find a unit that's before him in the list, and bring their requirements down so that it frees up some mods when he gets to it. But I use this option to get to a point where all my units are succeeding, and what it allows me to do is kind of exit out before it spends hours and hours on the units down the list, trying to get them to be as successful. So the previous option which was uncapped reordering, is kind of opposite of this one. This one would be, as soon as I get an option that fails, exit out. The other one is, if I get an option that fails, don't reorder prior units. So you would never use this one and the last one at the same time. But this is an option that I personally use, and the reason I do this is because I am trying to tweak my stats up and see how high I can get on everyone. And this exit out of failure after failure lets me know, oh, okay, I hit a breaking point. My mods can't support the targets that I hit. I've got to start jiggling things a little bit. I've got to decrease some or increase others to get a full set of automation that is successful. So that is a wrap for our automation video. I hope you guys found the series of the 3 videos useful. I hope you took something out of it and able to get some good mod sets for your units. Automation can be pretty daunting. There are a lot of options that allow you to kind of tweak what you want out of them. Some of the basics I showed at the beginning, I think, should give you a pretty good foundation for getting a good result set. And then as you get more used to the tool and understanding the options, you can play around with different options. Feel free to post feedback in our Discord channel. Maybe I'll come out with some more videos on how to get some additional performance.